And it's all kind of dependent on who the mentor is. And there are, as I mentioned in that Encanto video, 5 types of mentors. But it even gets deeper than that. So get your notebook out and buckle in, because you're not going to want to miss a moment of this. And since it's June, I just want to wish y'all a happy Pride Month. And I want you to take note that when you are writing your mentors, maybe think a little bit beyond, a little bit outside the old white guy. Because when I was digging into mentors in all of my favorite stories, I realized that the cis het male representation of mentors is pretty consistent.
What if I told you that there are tools that you can use to break through the writer's block, not limit yourself, but express the story that you want to tell and break through the block?
A mentor. Now, just for ease, we are going to stick with the examples we have had so far. There are 5 kinds of mentors, as I mentioned in that Encanto video. And we're going to break them down and look at them. And there are 2 scenes in the mandatory scenes that we mentioned as well. Obviously, the Meet the Mentor scene that everybody thinks about. But there is another one that people often forget is a mentor scene. And so stick to the end. You don't want to miss that one, because that is going to wrap up your story and give you the ending that you so desperately want and get you through the muddy middle. So don't miss out. But first, what are the 5 different kinds of mentors? Well, first of all, there is the guide. Now, the guide is your Dumbledore, your Gandalf, your Morpheus, the guy from Matrix. I know he's not one of my examples, but I want to include him here because otherwise it's a whole lot of white guys. A whole lot of cis het white guys are mentors. And I want to mention Morpheus because he is definitely representing there, which is great. Please add some diversity to the comments because they all seem to be white guys with the very few exceptions. Obi-Wan Kenobi. And we've got Jareth. Now, Jareth is an interesting one from the Labyrinth because he is also a shadow. And stick to the end of this series. Hit that subscribe and like button because we're going to talk at length about the shadow. But they are the last of our 8 mandatory characters. And we're only at number 2. So you don't want to miss those. Hit that subscribe and hit that like button. But yes, Jareth is a shadow. And this is really interesting about the mentor. More than any other mandatory character, they can do double time as the shadow. And the reason for this is largely because the mentor, their role in the story is to tell us about the extraordinary world, whether you're writing a fantasy or not. They're the ones who explain the way the world works to us and the hero. And without them, we don't know anything. But the thing is, if they know so much, why don't they solve the story? Why don't they do everything themselves? Why don't they be the hero of the story? Why do we need the hero? And there are a lot of explanations for this. Obi-Wan needs Luke because Obi-Wan failed once, and Luke happens to be the son of the shadow character of Darth Vader. So that's why he's unique for it. Obviously, we know that Harry is a Horcrux. It makes him unique to fight Voldemort. Nobody else can do it because you can't defeat Voldemort unless you kill Harry, and Voldemort himself has to do it. So Harry needs to be the one, and Dumbledore knows that. Also, Dumbledore has also failed. And so we have that. And Gandalf can't do it because he can't take the ring. Don't tempt me, Frodo, right? So we've explained that. And also Gandalf leaves. He goes off and he does some research, and then he gets detained, and then he leaves again when he fights the Balrog and he dies. Now, sometimes they come back again, but you need that mentor to go away, especially the guide who knows everything. Otherwise, the story gets boring. So one way that some writers have creatively in the past fixed this is by making that guide, or even some of the other types of mentors, but definitely a guide like Jareth, the shadow. And Jareth is unequivocally, we know he's the bad. We know he's the big bad we're going to face in the end. But he has offered a chance to Sarah to actually beat his labyrinth, but he's not going to actually help her on the journey. So it explains why he doesn't just take her to the middle if he knows how to do it, because he doesn't want to, because that's the challenge he set before her. So number 1, the guide. Number 2, the trainer. So this is a step down from the guide. If the guide is our know-it-all magic wizard who knows everything, the trainer is one step down. Well versed, knows a lot, but doesn't know everything. And probably this one is more likely to have failed. They often have a character arc themselves. And as soon as their character arc has been succeeded, as soon as they sort of right the wrong of their past, they tend to die as well. I probably should have said spoilers, because there are lots of, mentors they do not have a long life expectancy, but they do make it to that special scene at the begin of the ending payoff. So they do make it there, generally. Or at least some version of them makes it there. But they tend to disappear for the majority of the story. So some trainers that we've talked about, now we talked about Elisa, and I'm going to get to who Elisa's mentor is later on, but Goliath is actually also a protagonist in Gargoyles. Lisa and Goliath it's a love story ultimately, and they are, when you have a love story, you have 2 protagonists, and Goliath's mentor at the start of the series is Xanatos, is the Shadow. Again, we have a Shadow as our mentor figure, and that is a very strong story arc, because then there's a betrayal, and he's been betrayed before, so it's a very great character point for Goliath. I've mentioned that in a series, or maybe I didn't, but I should have, in a series like Harry Potter, you have multiple mentors, because every book will have a Meet the Mentor scene as well as the overarching Meet the Mentor scene. So in book 1, Hagrid is very much that mentor. In book 6, and I'll get to what kind of mentor Hagrid is. For the overarching story, it's Dumbledore. But for book 1, it's Hagrid. For book 6, it's Severus Snape, and he's a trainer, but he's a shadow trainer, because we're not sure, is he good or bad? And he's obviously not being very good to Harry when he's training him. So he is a trainer mentor. We also have in book 3, Lupin is a trainer mentor as well, but he's also kind of ambiguous as well, but he's definitely that trainer mentor. In Star Wars, in the first film, and I'm talking about the original 3 films with Luke Skywalker as the protagonist here, in that first film, Obi-Wan is a sort of trainer / guide, old man with a beard kind of mentor. And then in the second film, we have Yoda, which is a more reluctant trainer and a more spiritual trainer, which we'll get to, but definitely a trainer and a teacher. And he takes Luke through tasks in a way that Obi-Wan never did, and puts him through skill-setting tasks. So, guide, trainer. Number 3 is our parent. Now, the parent is an interesting one, because there's a lot of love and an emotional guide there, an emotional mentor, but also they can sometimes be an early barrier to the hero getting on the journey. Sometimes they even act as that threshold guardian. And we're going to talk more about threshold guardians next time. So hit that like and subscribe so you don't miss it. But a parent can sometimes act that way and keep the hero from going on the journey, generally because they want to protect them, sometimes because they're also the shadow. So they're a really interesting mentor to play with. And I've got lots of examples here from the different ones that we've talked about so far. So Nancy Drew's mentor is her father, Mr. Drew. And regardless of what book, because the books were sort of formulaic. little bit. Her dad is her mentor, and he helps her, disappears, but he comes back and helps her, and he's there to help her. My one woman that I could find is one of these, and you might be surprised, but I had a really good think, and the only version of the mentor that always fits her, because I think she plays a different role every series, and like I said, when you're in a series you can play with these aspects of these characters, is Carolyn from Killing Eve. Carolyn, and the reason I say she's a parent, obviously she's not a mom figure, she's very not mommy, but she is she's sometimes in the way, and she's sometimes not, but I don't think she's ever honestly against Eve. Sometimes she has her own interests at heart, and sometimes she has a bigger picture in mind because she knows more of the world, and sometimes she acts as a shadow, and sometimes she doesn't, and she's sometimes a trickster, which we're going to talk about later as well, the tricksters and the shapeshifters, and she definitely plays those roles in certain episodes. But always she is a mentor to Eve, and always she falls in the middle here. She's not equal to Eve like a counselor. She's not way above like the guide. She sits right here in this middle third kind of mentor. If you think of it as a grading scale going down. We've got the guide, we've got the trainer, and then we've got the parent, which is still above our hero, but is flawed. And Carolyn is definitely falling in that space. So I put her there. Argue with me in the comments if you want. If you want to argue with me and you want to tell me that she's a counselor or if she's a guide, let me know in the comments, because she does play those parts as well. But I've put her in the middle because I feel like she's always in that space. If you're getting lost, don't worry. I got you covered. Just head over to my Patreon account and you can get the download where I break all this down and help you with questions and prompts to get your mentor just right. So as I mentioned, we also have Hagrid in this space. In book 1, he definitely feels like that father figure, and he comes in and he is very nurturing, and he explains the world to Harry much more than Dumbledore does. Dumbledore is as far away. Like I said, we have his Meet the Mentor with him for the entire series, but really Harry doesn't meet Dumbledore until the end of book 1. He sees him and he knows who he is, but they don't have a moment together until the end of book 1. And he behaves more like his Meet the Mentor. He behaves more like his mentor in book 2 than he does in book 1. Book 2, he gives him his gift. Getting ahead of myself. But Hagrid is definitely the one who gives Harry the tools that he needs. He gives him the idea that he gives him the flute that he uses to get past Fluffy. He gives him the knowledge to get past Fluffy. He's definitely the mentor in that first book, and he's a parental mentor, which is why we are so worried for his safety in book 6, because he is the last father figure left alive. And thank you, J.K. Rowling, for not killing Hagrid. Golly, that would have been tragic, wouldn't it? Before we move on from this, I want to talk about Batman. And Batman has many mentors. I mean, the character has been going on for 80 years. And to go through every single Batman story and tell you who their mentor is would take longer than a YouTube video should ever be. But ultimately, every single Batman story, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, the mentor, when Batman is when Batman's the protagonist, that is, the mentor is Alfred, is the father figure of Alfred, and that is a lovely thing. And the gifts that Alfred gives him generally are of rest and help and food. What I really love in the most recent Batman film, The Batman, with Robert Pattinson, is Alfred is actually more help than he has typically been in the stories that I have seen. Obviously, there's a lot of Batman stories, and I haven't seen them all or read them all, but Batman relies on Alfred's spy training. I can't remember what spies are called in Britain, but that he relies on his training to understand the codes that the Riddler's putting out, and that's really wonderful. And he gives him a gift, and he gives him the knowledge of what really happened with his father. Absolutely brilliant. I love that as well so much. But and yes, it could have been done better. And I'm not going to get into that and argue with. Please don't get all nasty in the comments. But relying on IP a little bit there, I suppose. But still, the Alfred Batman relationship is that of a father-son in a really beautiful way. And sometimes he's a spiritual mentor as well, but always he is his dad, and it's gorgeous, and I love it. And that's a really special relationship. And so we're moving on to 4, which is I just mentioned it, the spiritual leader. It's sometimes called the monk or the priest. This is a mentor who pops up a lot in love stories and in worldview stories. Very much a more internal plot mentor, less than a external plot. They some in an action story, they sometimes act also as the trainer or the parent, but definitely that spiritual leader. So in Waitress, now I need to correct myself. When I did my Waitress video, I said that I thought that the doctor was her mentor, and on further reflection, I'm going to say that I was misled. And the reason I was misled is because the doctor has a meet the mentor scene, is in a place of authority, and then has, after what I called the long dark night of her soul moment, gives her a gift. But I actually think the long dark night of her soul is actually when she is just about to give birth. And so I think I misread that. And the gift is given to her after she has her aha moment, when she breaks up with her husband. So actually the climax is a montage when she rebuilds her life. And if you look at it that way, then old Joe is her mentor. And I actually really like that, because it means that the ending build is basically like we looked at when we looked at the beginning hook and how that could happen so quickly, and you can really get through those first few scenes of their hero's journey really fast in The Waitress. They basically do the same thing with their ending, which is lovely and really really a wonderful way to do the storytelling. And I wish we had gotten more from Andrea Shelley. She was just a wonderful, wonderful writer, and really, really knew the medium. Lastly, before I move on from the spiritual leader, I want to talk about, I mentioned that not all Batman stories are Batman stories, and they aren't. Batman sometimes is the protagonist of a Batman story, and sometimes he's not at all. Year One is a situation where the protagonist is Jim Gordon. Batman is in it, and he's present, but he's not the shadow, and he's not the mentor. He plays the part of the shapeshifter, which is still really interesting to tell a Batman story, and he's not the main focus of the story.
Actually, whenever we're talking about the Bat family, whether it is the DC animated universe, the Batman versus Robin, Batman Bad Blood, Batman, Son of the Batman, Young Justice, the Justice League, and anytime we see a Robin or a Batgirl or Batwoman, then we are seeing a mentor situation where Batman, he may have a growth story arc all his own, but ultimately he is acting as a mentor to those younger members of the Bat family. And it is wonderful to see him struggle to do that, and it's a joy, but also in them seeing through his tough persona and how he actually cares about them quite a bit.
Flashpoint paradox. Batman is again the mentor, which is so much fun because Batman Thomas Wayne is a main character as well, and he's an ally. But Batman Bruce Wayne is the mentor, and the meet the mentor scene is at the beginning where he says to the Flash, they like to get in your head, and then at the end, Flash actually gives him the gift, and then Bruce gives him a gift back, which I think is really lovely. It's just such a great story. I love those stories where Batman plays other parts because he's such a great character. And yes, we're relying on IP a little bit, but he's such a great character that I love when he's a protagonist, but sometimes, he doesn't, because he's a long-standing character, he doesn't do a lot of growing. So when he can be involved in the growing of others and other people recognize his value, I love it so much. I just love it so much. I just love my Batman. Anyway, I've talked too much about Batman. On last of our 5 is the Counsellor, and then we're going to talk about the last scene. So stick to us, don't go away, because these are all the different kinds of mentors, and I feel and then we're going to talk about the 2 scenes that they have to be in. Meet the mentor, I know you know, but we want the last scene. Don't go away, because you don't want to miss it. 5 is the Counsellor. Now the Counsellor is the lowest of that scale. So the guide, it knows everything, and now we're down at the bottom. The Counsellor. Counsellor is almost even. In a love story, like Newt and Tina in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Tina is the mentor. She's also the threshold guardian. And she's also an ally. And oftentimes in love stories, the love interest is the mentor, especially in a story where it's an ensemble and different people have journeys and stuff, so they become the mentor for each other. And in a maturation plot, that often happens as well. In another series that I've mentioned, I started this whole series with, was Twin Peaks. Dale Cooper, who's his mentor? His mentor is Harry. It's a buddy cop drama, and Harry is his mentor, and he is Harry's mentor, and they teach each other as they go. He teaches Harry about the spiritual world of the dark and the Black and the White Lodge, and Harry teaches him about the lore of Twin Peaks, and they teach each other, and it's lovely. It's a beautiful relationship in that way, and they work as each other's mentors. As I mentioned in the Encanto video, Bruno is another one of these counselor mentors. You could argue he's a parent, but I would say he's a counselor because he's not above. He's not, even though he's her uncle, he's not above Maribel. They are equal in this part of the journey. As I said, when I talked about Gargoyles, Goliath's mentor was Xanatos, and he was a shadow trainer. But Elisa's mentor is Goliath, because he is her guide to that extraordinary world of gargoyles. And sometimes the exposition is given to Hudson, so you might argue that Hudson is both their mentors, and I suppose in some episodes he behaves that way. But over the whole arc of the series, she learns about what it is to be a gargoyle from him, and he learns about what it is to be a human. As I said, in the love story, oftentimes the 2 parts of the love story, they work as mentors for each other and teach each other about the extraordinary world that is their love. because that's, in a love story, the extraordinary world is the world of being with somebody. So most often the partners of that love story teach each other and are mentors to each other. Lastly, last but certainly not least, Spike Spiegel, our tragic hero. Who is his mentor? It's another counselor. It's Jet. Definitely Jet. He is, now Spike doesn't meet him, but we meet him. And there's a very beautiful, one of my favorite scenes in the pilot, where Jet explains to him, you know, where the money is gone. And that a lot of their conversations revolve around food and money. Spike wants food, and Jet says, well, we need money. So the episodes often begin with Jet coming in with the words for the plan for getting the money, and then Spike goes off and actions them. And in that way, he works as a mentor, but they're a great team in that way as well. So those are 5 types of mentors. We got the guide at the top, above our hero. We've got the trainer above our hero. We've got the parent above our hero. The spiritual priest, leader, mentor above our hero. And then equal to our hero is the counselor, who goes along on the journey with them. And as I said, there are 2 mandatory scenes where the mentor will appear. And the first is obviously the Meet the Mentor. This is where the mentor explains the extraordinary world. They give us a lot of exposition, and sometimes there is subtext going on, either because they are the shadow or because there's something they're not telling. A great example is when Obi-Wan explains who Darth Vader is and doesn't give him the whole story. And that is a really powerful scene when we reveal it later. And the other scene, the scene that I have been teasing you with this entire video, the scene that every writer must have in the hero's journey, and so many times is forgotten, is the reward. Remember I said this when we talked about those scenes that we've got, those mandatory scenes we've got to have. The reward is often forgotten. This happens after the abyss, the long dark night of the soul. The hero is given a reward for going through the ordeal, and they have that reward, and that reward is a tool that they need to come through the end of the story, to defeat the shadow and to be victorious. And the thing is, the mentor must always give a gift. But in a series, or when the mentor is the shadow, sometimes the gift is a way you can trick your audience. So you would have 2 gifts, because remember, the reward scene has to come after the ordeal. But I can give you multiple examples when the mentor that we've already discussed has given a gift. Right? All right, so I'm going to go through them really quickly. Jareth gives the peach. This happens before the ordeal. Peach through Hoggle. He gives the peach through Hoggle to Sarah. And the peach is what leads her into the ordeal. It's the entrance to the cave when she bites the peach. And it's tricky, because what it does there is it fools the audience into thinking, because we have just been through the pit, the bog of eternal stench, we think we've been through the ordeal. So we think we've got the reward, but we know that Jared gave it to her. And so then we go into this, and it's just a really, really wonderful moment. And because Jareth is the shadow, it makes sense that the gift wouldn't be the tool she needs to get through. The tool she needs to get through is the tool she gives herself when she rejects all her toys and her prizes and all her, because again, we think we're getting a gift. She gets her room, or she thinks she's getting a gift. She gets her room and all her toys and everything. But she rejects those and tears them down. And then her friends are there, and her friends are how she gets through the ending payoff. So we have 2 fake outs of the gift in Labyrinth. It's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful storytelling. Old Joe is probably one of my best examples of a story that is a complete story in one. We meet Old Joe in the diner while in the first trimester, right before Jenna begins her affair with the doctor. And he imparts some wisdom, but not a lot. But he imparts wisdom all through the book. But obviously he can't go on the journey for her because he's a man and he's old and she's a woman and pregnant, and he's not going to do that for her. And he can't, live with her husband for her. So it's really interesting when the story just works that way. But he, at the end, comes, visits her right before she gives birth and gives her an envelope, says, open it when you're done. It's silly. And she opens it, and there's this check. And the check, as I said, is what gets her through, what solves her problem. Once she has had her aha moment and said to her husband, I don't want you anymore, and said to her doctor, we're not going to do this, and she's all on her own, it's his check that is her tool, that she is going to actually action all the things, all her dreams. She is going to get to the pie contest. She's going to win the pie contest, obviously, because we've established that that's her magic power. And she's going to open her own pie shop. And it is absolutely wonderful how that works. Next time, we're going to talk about the Guardian. We're going to talk about allies. Hit that like and subscribe button. And until then, keep writing. And this raises a very good point that oftentimes you can fake out your audience by having 1 or 2 people play that mentor figure, especially in a long series like Batman. So if you're writing multiple books, you can do that so that the audience isn't 100% sure what's going to happen and they don't get ahead of you, because you never want your audience to get ahead of you. So with that said, let's head back over and continue this mentor's journey.